Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something central to national security. We're talking about that intricate, often pretty hidden world where intelligence agencies and the presidency intersect. It's complex, high stakes, lots of secrecy. Okay, so our focus for this deep dive is this audio segment we found from right-wing news. It features someone called the Voice of Reason. And he's discussing some, frankly, pretty big claims. They're sourced from sites like State of the Nation and the Millennium Report. So our mission really is to unpack these different viewpoints that the source presents, specifically about allegations that intelligence was being held back, from the very top. We want to explore what these claims and the reactions to them might tell us about trust, how information flows, and just the power dynamics in the highest levels of government. Let's try and sort of dig into what's being claimed here. All right, let's start with the main claim. It's from that State of the Nation article the source discusses. The headline was, U.S. spies fearful of leaks withholding intel from President Trump. And the specific allegation is that President Trump was deliberately being kept in the dark about certain intelligence. Particularly, and this seems key, the means of collecting various bits of intelligence information.
Yeah, and what's really striking about that claim, just right off the bat, is what it implies about, well, institutional trust, or the lack of it. You have this fundamental tension, right? Intelligence agencies, their job, a huge part of it, is protecting sources and methods, how they get their info. That's vital. But then you have the president, commander-in-chief, needs, theoretically, all the intelligence to make decisions, critical national security decisions. So if this withholding claim is true, as the source presents it, those two essential obligations are in direct conflict, open conflict, really. And when the source talks about the means of collecting, they mean the how, the secret processes, the tech, maybe human sources, the nuts and bolts of spying.
Okay. And the source doesn't just leave it there. It points to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, which apparently, citing former and current intel officials, seemed to back up this idea that Trump was specifically being kept in the dark about the spy agent's means of collecting information. It's interesting that a mainstream outlet like the Journal is mentioned as echoing part to this narrative.
That crossover is definitely significant for the story our source is building. It gives a kind of weight, perhaps, to claims that might otherwise be, maybe dismissed as purely partisan. The source also highlights Representative Adam Schiff's view on this. He apparently said intelligence agencies had valid concerns with the Trump administration. Schiff linked it to alleged manufacturing leaks. And he even suggested, according to the source, that holding back information may just be justifiable. He stressed the intelligence community's most sacred obligation, protecting the intelligence itself and the people who produce it. So it highlights this perceived need to shield operations, even from potential leaks high up.
Right. But as you'd almost expect, with something this big, the source also includes the other side, the denials. There's a statement from the Director of National Intelligence, which Fox News apparently picked up. He flatly denied any intel blackout, said something like, any suggestion that the U.S. intelligence community is withholding information is just not true. A very clear denial.
Exactly. And alongside that official denial, the source mentions an unnamed White House official talking to the Wall Street Journal. This official apparently said, there is nothing that leads us to believe that this is an accurate account of what is actually happening. So you have the official channels pushing back hard against this story.
Okay, so denials from the DNI, from the White House, but then there's President Trump's own take, right?
Yeah.
Expressed, as often happened, via Twitter. The source notes that while Trump did acknowledge Michael Flynn might have shown poor judgment talking to Russia,
Right.
he framed the, quote, larger story and the real scandal differently. For him, it was about someone inside U.S. intelligence recording those top-secret conversations and then, crucially, illegally leaking them to the press. He tweeted, and the source quotes this, the real scandal is that classified information is being illegally given out by intelligence like candy. Very un-American. So he's basically saying the leaks are the problem, not any withholding. He flips the script.
It really does show a staggering level of distrust, doesn't it? On all sides, potentially. And the source ties this into Michael Flynn's resignation. Describes it as a moment when a shield kind of went up between the intel agencies and the White House. From the source's perspective, Flynn wasn't just forced out. He was the target of a political takedown. And they point fingers at holdovers from Barack Obama's administration within places like the FBI and CIA. This isn't just suggesting internal friction, office politics. It's painting a picture of, like, an entrenched resistance within the very bodies meant to serve the president.
Wow. So, okay, we have these claims about internal resistance, even a political takedown, as the source puts it. But then the voice of reason in the source material, he broadens the scope quite a bit. He talks about something he calls Barack Obama's new shadow government.
Yeah.
And he gives these figures: 250 chapters spread across 50 states, 32,000 volunteers, and 20,000 phone calls already made to senators. What's important here is how the source presents it. They say it's not just some conspiracy theory, but a, quote, real problem for Republicans.
Right, and that claim really shifts the narrative that the source is building. It takes it beyond just, friction within government agencies. It frames the conflict as much broader, almost like an ideologically driven movement operating nationwide. It suggests the resistance wasn't just, say, a few individuals acting on their own, but maybe something more organized, designed to exert influence from outside government, too. From this viewpoint, it's presented as a serious political threat. It implies the fight for control, especially over information, isn't just inside the Beltway. It's everywhere. It adds, a whole other dimension to this idea of who controls the information flow.
That is a powerful claim. Suggests something much larger, more coordinated. But let's circle back for a second to the intelligence withholding allegation itself. To really grasp the source's argument, we need to be clear on what information they claimed was being kept back. The source seems to consistently make a distinction, doesn't it, between the means of collecting information and the actual information itself.
Yes, and that distinction is absolutely critical to understanding the source's point. And the whole debate, really, the means of collecting, that's the how. Sensitive methods, sources, technology. Protecting that is standard practice, absolutely essential. The information itself, that's the what. The actual intelligence reports, the data, the assessments. The source seems to imply, or at least focus on, the idea that withholding the means was happening. Now, whether they also allege what was withheld is perhaps less clear, but the distinction matters. Withholding the means might be justifiable to protect sources, arguably. Withholding the actual intelligence product needed for decisions, that would be, a much more direct challenge to presidential authority. This separation helps understand where the source sees the alleged obstruction happening.
Okay, that clarification helps. So given this whole picture, the distrust, the alleged withholding, the counterclaims, this idea of a shadow government, the voice of reason in the source starts issuing some pretty stark warnings. He talks about potential outcomes if this intelligence blackout, as he sees it, is real. Things like concerns about false flag attacks.
Right. Operations made to look like someone else did them.
Exactly. Or even attacks on individuals. It really ramps up the stakes for the listener, presents a potentially dangerous situation.
And this ties directly into that broader sort of philosophical point the source makes quite forcefully.
Yeah.
He who controls the information controls. It's almost a mantra in the segment. This idea is ancient, of course, but it has particular resonance now. And the source's push for listeners to share this information on social media, it's presented as more than just sharing news. It's framed as a way to counter what they call the dishonest mainstream media or Washington politicians. It's positioned as an act of reclaiming control, challenging the established narratives, widespread sharing as a form of public empowerment.
And beyond the warnings and the philosophy, the source gets practical too. Gives listeners some tangible advice, things like prepping, suggesting extra food, water, medical supplies. They even recommend a specific book, Conquering the Collapse, for learning more about preparedness.
Yeah, it moves from high-level political intrigue right down to individual action and survival skills. Quite a range.
So let's try and pull this together as we wrap up our deep dive. We've really explored this central tension laid out in our source material. On one side, you have these serious allegations. Intelligence, or at least the means of collecting it, being withheld from a president. Then you have strong official denials from the intelligence community itself and the White House. And layered on top of that, the counterclaim, particularly from President Trump's perspective in this source, that the real issue wasn't withholding, but illegal leaks from intelligence to the press, driven by politics.
It's a really complex knot of accusations and denials, and it forces us, I think, to really consider the role of trust or mistrust in government, especially around something as sensitive as intelligence. It highlights what a massive challenge it must be for any leader if they feel they can't trust or perceive opposition from the very agencies meant to provide them with vital national security information. It's like a crack in the very foundation of how government is supposed to work.
Absolutely. It leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it? When those lines of communication, that fundamental trust, seem strained or even broken between a nation's leadership and its intelligence apparatus,
Yeah.
what are the potential consequences for national security, for policy, for everything? And maybe just as importantly, how do we as citizens trying to stay informed navigate these incredibly contested stories?
Yeah.
Where do you even begin to figure out where the truth might lie?